Since Saturday night, everybody in the news has been focused, quite understandably, on the scary security breach at the White House Correspondents Dinner in Washington this weekend, in which a man armed with guns and knives got himself and those weapons from his room at the hotel down to the site of the Correspondents' Dinner at the Washington Hilton after the Correspondents' Dinner was already underway. He sprinted past a security checkpoint, headed toward the ballroom itself before he was apprehended. After writings attributed to him reportedly include him describing himself as an assassin and criticizing the president and his administration, the man who was apprehended at the Washington Hilton was charged today with attempted assassination of President Trump. And while the administration has confirmed that a Secret Service agent was shot in his bulletproof vest during the incident, he was wounded, we're told not seriously. It's not clear whether that Secret Service agent was shot by the guy who's just been arrested and charged, or whether he might have been hit by friendly fire. But regardless, in that incredibly stressful, incredibly high stakes, incredibly dangerous situation for the U.S. Secret Service, just spare a thought for the additional burden on them at the moment. The additional distraction and nonsense they are having to deal with at the moment, on top of their existentially challenging jobs. Because the United States Secret Service, God bless them, is part of the Department of Homeland Security. And the Department of Homeland Security is a worldwide scale level disaster right now. I mean, it is the Department of Homeland Security where we have the guy who says he was teleported to a Waffle House in Georgia, serving as the key official in charge of the government's disaster response to hurricanes, earthquakes, and fires. Why not just teleport the hurricanes to somewhere less dangerous? It is in the Department of Homeland Security where part of the reason they can't open these Trump prison camps is because literally, I'm not kidding, in a place like Social Circle, Georgia, where they wanted to put one of these things, they told local officials in writing that local officials didn't have to worry that this huge prison camp for thousands of people would be drawing too much water from the town's water supply. They didn't have to worry about that, they said in writing, because these geniuses plan to use the water at night, at, quote, off-peak hours. So, hey, problem solved. You said we couldn't use 1 million gallons a day, so we won't. We'll use 1 million gallons a night. Ta-da! No problem. It is in the Department of Homeland Security where not one, not two, but 3 local jurisdictions are either bringing criminal prosecutions against Homeland Security agents for their actions, or they are trying to. In Ramsey County, Minnesota, it's for dragging this American citizen out into subzero temperatures in his underwear. An American citizen. In Hennepin County, Minnesota, it's for allegedly pointing a loaded gun at the heads of random drivers from a moving vehicle. In Durango, Colorado, it's for grabbing this woman by the hair and throwing her down an embankment. I mean, these are local prosecutors having to bring criminal charges under state law against federal agents for their wilding against American citizens in the streets of American cities. That's the Department of Homeland Security right now. It's in the Department of Homeland Security where the former Secretary of the Department, Kristi Noem, according to the Wall Street Journal, has been refusing to leave the waterfront home reserved for the Coast Guard Commandant, which she took over for herself. She's refusing to leave it, reportedly, even though she hasn't been Homeland Security Secretary for weeks now, since she was fired last month. Quoting from the Wall Street Journal, the current Coast Guard Commandant has told associates he plans to move into the house, but he can't because, quote, former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has continued using the waterfront house on Joint Base Anacostia Balling, which is typically designated for the Commandant of the Coast Guard. She's been using it since she took it over as a cabinet member, but she has continued to use the house even since Trump ousted her from the Homeland Security Department in early March. When the Journal asked the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security for comment, they did not receive a response. But I mean, that's kind of the tenor at the Homeland Security Department these days under Donald Trump, right? Where the person in charge randomly just takes over a Coast Guard admiral's house, then refuses to give it back even after she gets fired. And now the Coast Guard Commandant, whose house it is supposed to be, is trying to find anyone to help here. That's my house, isn't it? It's supposed to be my... Doesn't that go with the job? Isn't this... I'm in charge of the Coast Guard. It's in the Department of Homeland Security right now, where the department has just had to confirm formally that a top-level counterterrorism official, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism, has been put on leave as a result of a reported Inspector General investigation. An Inspector General investigation that has yielded lurid headlines like this one in the New York Post. Quote, DHS bigwig put on leave after ex-boyfriend accuses glitzy terror official of $40,000 sugar baby scheme. Okay. I mean, put aside all the rest of it, I'm just going to say, I think the phrase glitzy terror official is enough. Pretty much all you need to know about the Department of Homeland Security under the leadership of Donald Trump. And listen, the response from the White House thus far to that armed man being tackled at the White House Correspondents Dinner, thus far the response from the White House has been to further enthuse about the president's ballroom project and to say that surely now they ought to be allowed to fire the comedian Jimmy Kimmel. That's the right response to, yeah. It's the world's least serious responses to what was actually a serious security situation. But the agents, the Secret Service agents who actually had to spring into action to contend with this potential catastrophe, who had to physically respond in seconds to this sprinting, armed potential shooter. I mean, they deserve better than to have to do their work within the most catastrophically broken, flagrantly failing part of the government under this president.
Trump set aside $38 billion to build a nationwide archipelago of prison camps, not to deport violent criminals, not to secure the border, to hold people without trial in secret warehouse facilities purchased quietly across the country.
Mike Riston and Miles Taylor are working together, among a lot of other folks, on a new project called Get the Facilities Out, GTFOICE.org. It's nationwide. They're calling it a rapid response network to stop ICE prison camps before they start. If you go to maddowblog.com, we have a link to what they're describing as their action guide. It basically leads you through what to do when ICE comes to your town. Do you have an ICE enforcement surge in your town? Click here. Do you have a secret warehouse purchase in your town? Click here. Does it look like they're going to be trying to do some sort of voter intimidation in your town on election day? Click here. It's really practical, well-designed, well-resourced, well thought out. And it is coming at a very auspicious time for this kind of a fight. Joining us now, two guests. I never do this, but here are Mike Riston and Miles Taylor. Gentlemen, I'm really, really appreciative that you were both able to be here. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Mike, let me start with you. I know that the project is using your Project Saltbox data to track where new ICE prison camps are being planned, where they might be in the process. Tell me about your decision at Project Saltbox to join up with this larger effort. What are you hoping that members of the public will do with the kind of information and data you guys have been able to dig up?
Yeah, from the beginning, our mission has always been to put data in the hands of every single American citizen that cares about this issue so that they can use that data for good. And, it's kind of funny that Miles and I are working together, but we truly believe that this is a bipartisan American issue. This is not a progressive issue. This is not a Democratic issue. This is a American issue. And the way that we are going to put an end to these flagrant constitutional and legal violations, as we've seen with the ruling in Williamsport and suits being brought in other jurisdictions, is by banding together American and using data and every tool at our disposal to organize and push back against this encroachment on our rights, this violation of our fellow citizens' safety, and to make sure that we're doing all that we can with the resources that we have to be effective in that fight.
Miles, you have been a very high-profile critic of Donald Trump and therefore one of his targets for years. Tell me about your thinking about focusing on this issue, fighting the Trump prison camps. Why is this important to you, and what do you hope to be able to accomplish working together?
Well, first, Rachel, I have to say, no joke, this is partly thanks to you because I had seen your segment with Michael. And our team at Defiance was thinking, how can we do more in this space? And so, as Michael knows, after I'd seen coverage of this, I started trying to get into his DMs. I was like, how do I get to this guy? And Michael protects his information well. So I'm trying to hunt him down and say, we want to work with you. Let's use this data to alert Americans about these facilities. And frankly, Rachel, to crowd cancel them. I mean, I've experienced this before all throughout politics. Usually it's in a bad way when people are getting canceled. This is a good thing to go cancel these facilities, and it's clear in the communities where it's been successful that crowd cancellation, that outpouring of frustration is enough to get municipalities and real estate developers and folks to take a beat and say, is this really what we want to sign up for? And on a personal front, Rachel, look, you know this about me. I saw these facilities. I saw them up close. I know what kind of detention capacity DHS needs to actually secure the country, and it ain't this. I mean, what most Americans don't realize is DHS will have more detention capacity if they go through with this plan than the entire federal prison system. The size of Salt Lake City, Utah. Imagine the whole city of Salt Lake surrounded and every man, woman, and child in federal custody. That's how much detention space DHS will have. And my former department does not need that much detention space to go arrest violent criminal folks who are in this country undocumented. It does not. The math doesn't add up. The math only adds up if you're trying to build a police state.
Wow.
The math only adds up in one way. If DHS goes through with this plan, they will have more detention capacity than the entire federal prison system, more than the size Lake City, Utah. Every man, woman, and child in that city in federal custody simultaneously. That is not an immigration policy, by the way. That is the infrastructure of a police state being assembled in real time with congressional funding and bipartisan silence. And it's not working. Not because the administration gave up, because people in 180 locations across the country stood up and said not here. Mount Kisco New York, Alaska, Tucson Arizona, San Antonio, Texas, Salt Lake City, Utah. Communities, not cages. Catholic clergy, local elected officials, state attorneys general filing lawsuits, citizens, banks, shareholders being confronted at their own meeting over hundreds of million prison camp investment. This is what resistance actually looks like. Not cable news panels, people in the rain on Saturday morning outside a warehouse site. And
I recognize that I am part of the national media. So therefore, I am a little self-conscious about the fact that the national media has really been sucking its thumb on this story and hasn't much caught on to it yet. The national media has been really behind on this story. But local media have been taking notice of these fights everywhere they're happening. And local media everywhere this weekend took notice of these protests that happened in more than 180 different locations all over the country. And I'm just telling you right now, file this for future reference. Someday, when this signature sort of landmark turn against the Trump administration goes down in American history, when somebody in the future, looking back at this time, finally figures out that this was actually a really dramatic and important thing. When sometime in the future, somebody figures out that Donald Trump, when he got back into office, he tried to build himself a huge archipelago of prisons to hold people without trial. And he succeeded in getting Republicans in Congress to give him billions and billions of dollars for it. And his administration really did make all these secret, ominous warehouse purchases all over the country to do this for him. Someday, somewhere, someone in the future is going to marvel at the fact that despite the fact that Trump got back into office after everything about him, despite the fact that he got funding for this thing, despite the fact that they bought these things, somebody in the future is going to marvel at the fact that none of these things ever actually got opened. That Donald Trump did not get his archipelago of prison camps to hold people outside the legal system. And the reason he didn't get it is not because he didn't try hard enough, but because people all over the country stood up and said, no, not here. You cannot do this. We won't let you. You, sir, have a lot of bad ideas. This is the worst one, and we're not going to let you do it in our town. Someday that history will be written about this moment in American history. And when that history is finally written, I can tell you right now, all the footnotes in that history are going to be to like blue sky posts from local activists and Substack articles from local activists and archived stories from local newspapers and little straight to the point YouTube clips from the local TV news stations we keep being told have all gone away, but they have been covering this even as the national media has fallen down on the job. And so I'll show you some of what I know. Here's Mount Kisco, New York this weekend. Protesting this weekend against Trump's ICE prison camps out in the cold and the rain on Saturday in Mount Kisco, New York. Here's Anchorage, Alaska this weekend, where they had signs naming and shaming their Republican members of Congress who voted to fund ICE's expansion. Here's Colma, California this weekend. With the banner that you see there, Stop ICE Warehouse Detention. Here's Tucson, Arizona, protesting this weekend against Trump's ICE prison camps. They're outside the office of their Republican Congressman, Juan Ciscomani, in Tucson. Here's El Paso, Texas, where the largest existing ICE prison is already up and running. It is not one of these warehouses they want to build. It's a tent facility that they built at Camp East Montana in El Paso. It has a horrific record of prisoners dying and infectious disease outbreaks. El Pasoans this weekend turned out in big numbers. They marched from the gates of Camp East Montana to the local Homeland Security offices, saying no to Trump's ICE prison camps. There were protests against Trump prison camps in Marietta, Georgia this weekend, and in Conyers, Georgia, and in McHenry, Illinois, and in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Communities, not cages. In Portland, Maine, there were protests. In Portland, Maine, Trump's federal agents took a 19-year-old nursing student and locked her up in one of these ICE prisons. And Portlanders this weekend were out on the street saying, we want her back. There were protests against Trump prison camps this weekend in Southlake, Texas. There was a big protest this weekend in Salt Lake City, Utah, outside the governor's mansion. Salt Lake City is one of the places they are trying to build another one of these huge warehouse Trump prison camps. There was another really big one in San Antonio, Texas. In San Antonio, people rallied in front of the warehouse site itself, including local Catholic clergy and local elected officials. San Antonio has been pulling out all the stops locally to try to stop this thing that Trump's trying to do to them. Local news reports say that, even though it's Texas, so they're not going to get any help from their state government, local news reports say that city officials in San Antonio are not only passing resolutions trying to stop this thing within their own power, they're also currently taking legal advice on whether they too, as a city, can bring the kind of lawsuit that has been brought by the state of New Jersey, by the state of Michigan, by the state of Maryland. This weekend and over the last few days, we saw a whole bunch of protests in the Northeast, specifically against Citizens Bank, which is based in the Northeast. Citizens Bank has hundreds of millions of dollars invested in companies that run these immigrant prisons for Trump. In a statement, Citizens Bank said in part that it does not comment on specific customer or client partnerships. They said, we, quote, regularly review our partnerships and evaluate clients against applicable laws, regulations, and our internal risk standards. That's how they have tried to sort of deflect attention from this matter. But it has not succeeded. This was the scene at their shareholders meeting in Providence, Rhode Island. And all over these past few days, protests at Citizens Bank branches asking the bank to drop these investments. From, as I said, headquarters in Providence to Northampton, Massachusetts, to Great Neck, New York, to Saratoga, New York, to Wilmington, Delaware, to Plymouth, New Hampshire, to the Bronx in New York City, to Queensbury, New York, to Roslindale, Massachusetts, to Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. All over the Northeast, people over the last few days have been protesting at Citizens Bank branches and at their shareholders meeting, protesting against Citizens Bank over their involvement with Trump's immigrant prisons. And I'm showing you things. I'm showing you these things you might not be seeing elsewhere. Not only because this is the news, this is an important part of the story of how the United States is responding to this presidency, how Americans are spending their weekends these days now that Donald Trump is back in the White House with this agenda that he has. But I'm also showing you these things are happening because I think it's important to get our heads around the fact that these folks are winning in this fight. Trump has not been able to open a single one of these warehouse prison camps, despite setting aside $38 billion to try to do it. They have not yet been able to open a single one of these warehouse prison camps, and I don't know if they ever will. They know the public is against them. Despite what they say, that does matter to them. They've made clear over and over again since the start of this administration they would prefer to do things that are easy. And right now, this is not easy. The American people all over the country, even in red states, have made this a thing that is hard for them to do. And so they're not getting it done. And this is important not only in terms of thinking about the tactics of the American people saying no to this president, this phenomenally unpopular radical president, but it's also substantively important in terms of what kind of presidency this is going to be, because it would be a phenomenally radical new power to give this particular president, right? All these prison facilities to hold thousands, to hold tens of thousands of people who have never been convicted of a crime. That would be an incredibly radical power to give President Donald Trump. And I'm sure that is why the Trump administration would love to do it. But so far, despite their best efforts, it is really not working out for them.
While all of that is happening, the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security is a catastrophe that would be dark if it were not in charge of actual human beings. A senior counterterrorism official put on leave over for $40,000 sugar baby scheme. 3 local jurisdictions bringing criminal charges against DHS agents for dragging American citizens to subzero temperatures in their underwear, pointing loaded guns at drivers from moving vehicles, and grabbing women by their hair and throwing them down embankment. Kristi Noem still occupying the Coast Guard Commandant's house weeks after being fired, with the current commandant unable to move into his own residence. A FEMA official who says he was teleported to a Waffle House. This is the department responsible for protecting the country from the terrorists.